All right. So first, the definition that I found of apathy is sort of the lack of interest, lack of enthusiasm, or lack of concern for just about anything. I asked my family about it. What are their thoughts on apathy, and they said, I don't really don't feel good about it one way or another. It's just whatever. And so I had to find it on online what the real definition of apathy was. But I think apathy can be a big problem in a lot of people's lives at different stages of our lives for a lot of different reasons. Apathy happens for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes we just get burnt out on something. Like if I had a job and I've been doing the same job for a long time, and doing the same thing at the same job for a long period of time, I might become indifferent to everything that's going on, or how I feel about my job. And you know, some people there's a trauma that happens in their life. For instance, with a trauma and apathy, someone that went through a forest fire and they lost their home to a forest fire. There's just so much trauma that at some point they may not really care about what's going on, because they're trying to heal, and trying to heal while trying to move forward it can be difficult. And so there becomes an apathy of, I don't really care what's going on. I just want this to go away. Sometimes because of mental health, people become apathetic. A lot of times with like depression, there's people that become apathetic because of depression. They just there's a chemical imbalance, and somebody might ask them, "Hey, do you want to go do this?" And they're like, I just don't feel like doing anything. I don't really care to do this or that. And usually when people become apathetic within depression, that's when we have a little bit more, we need to pay attention a little bit more, because if that goes too far down the road, it can turn into something a little bit more serious. But a lot of times apathy, people just don't become apathetic because they want to become apathetic. Usually there's something to go along with it of why they've become apathetic. Another time that people become apathetic is when they start comparing themselves to other people. Comparing, hey, this is what I'm doing, comparing to, oh, this is what they're doing. Well, what they're doing is so much more fun and so much more glamorous, and I want to do that instead of what I'm doing right now. And so they just stop becoming enthusiastic about what they're actually doing right then and there. And so there's not just one cause of apathy. But I think something that has been interesting with the pandemic is the pandemic has created a lot of apathy within the church and within many churches. Before the pandemic, we were all going to church and we were all serving in our callings. We were all doing all these different things. And it was just, this is what we do. This is what we do. We go and we do this. And this is what my parents have taught. Or, there's just a pattern. It was a part of our life. And then everybody was told, stay home. And for a while, we didn't really have church at all. We just did it ourselves. And so we got out of those patterns. And for some people, they said, well, hey, instead of doing this, I'm going to do this over here. And it was a lot more fun to do some of these other things, or it wasn't as much work to go to church, because the big joke that I remember growing up is, what do you get when you go less active in the church? Well, you get an extra day off and a 10% raise. And so for some people that sounded really, really, it becomes less of work for them. It's not because they're horrible people or anything else. It's just, there's so much work about going to church. And so for some people, it's okay, I don't have to do this. But I think a big part of all of that is a lot of people, because they didn't have that constant reminder about church, they forgot who they were. You
Thank
lose
you.
that focus of who they are and what direction they're going in. And I think that's an essential part of learning what apathy really becomes, what it really is.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So we've kind of defined what apathy is and also some of the significant causes of apathy. Can you give us some sense of, based on your experience, what are some of the significant causes of apathy within membership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? I know we've got a lot of causes, but based on your experience, Brother Keel, what do you feel are some of the more prominent causes of apathy in the gospel?
Yeah, here I'm gonna read a quote by Elder Suarez, his talk that he gave just this last general conference. He talked a lot about apathy, and he said apathy is characterized by the gradual loss of excitement to fully engage in the Lord's gospel. It generally begins when we're feeling that we have already attained all necessary knowledge and blessings for our happiness in this life. This complacency, so to speak, causes us to take the gospel gifts for granted. And from then on, we run the risk of neglecting both our regular and our regular immersion in the essentials of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the covenants we have made. Consequently, we gradually distance ourselves from the Lord, weakening the ability to hear him, becoming indifferent and insensitive to the greatness of his work. Doubt regarding the truths we have already received may enter into our heart, making us vulnerable to the enemy's temptations. And I think that's a great summation of what causes some of that, or what it looks like in our lives. We get to the point where we're just going through the routine. I don't need to go to Sunday school because I've already heard this lesson before. I don't need to participate in this because I already know this, and I know, I've heard this before. And so we stop participating as much. I don't need to go to this activity because everybody else is going to be there. I don't need to help out with this because I've done 15 other ones, and so I can take some time off. So we just think, okay, I've done it all, and I don't need to engage anymore. So like here's two examples of somebody that shocked me and said, I've already been there, done this, and then somebody else that says, hey, I still need to do more. I had a brother when I was bishop. I was asking a brother to speak in church, and he's been a part of the ward for probably 50 plus years. And I asked him to do it, and he says, nope, I've retired from speaking. I don't do that anymore. And I was shocked. I was like, this is a good brother. Why would he say that? It doesn't make him any less of a good brother, but he just, nope, I don't do that anymore. He felt like he had done his part. He didn't need to do anymore. But then my grandpa, I was visiting my grandpa during some holidays, and he said, all right, great, you're here. He's like, this was when we still had high priest groups. And he said, today they're making me an assistant in the high priest group. I'm like, wow, that's great. And my grandpa was in his 90s at the time. And he was just like, I'm just grateful that they see that I have something more to give, and so the difference was, one brother says, I've given enough, I don't want to give anymore. And then my grandpa, who's like, I still have so much more to give, I want to give. And I think that's a big part of that apathy as well, is, nope, I've done my part, it's somebody else's turn. And we need to recognize we all have something to give, that the Lord still needs us all the time.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up Elder Sora's talk. I would encourage all of you to visit the site. And Brother Keel, if you've got that right in front of you, just copy and paste that into the chat function. But Elder Sora's talk was really, really insightful of kind of where we're at globally as a church, with this idea of apathy and how do we overcome it and how did it start? I mean, I think in the church there's always been a certain level of apathy. I think that's just natural when you bring a whole bunch of people together. Not everybody can be like Dean Thompson and constantly be going and no slowing and all that. But I think there's just this pandemic, this disconnect from each other, the lack of a pattern that you describe, Brother Keel, can really exacerbate that. And Elder Suarez does a very nice job of basically challenging us not to forget the blessings of the atonement. It's a very, as it should be, it's a very powerful conversation about our pride cycle and how I think we have to be careful with that as we basically tell the Lord, hey, thanks for that atonement thing, but don't necessarily need it now, you know, and I'm sick and tired of hearing, I don't need to do, it's post-pandemic, like something changed in our heart muscle or our brain or our spirit, because now we no longer are in a pandemic, apparently, but does a wonderful job. And the link is in the chat box right now. I would strongly encourage all of you to take a look at that. So Brother Keel, let's pause for just a second and let's see if we can get some additional definitions, personal definitions of this thing called apathy. So I'm going to open it up to the group. If you would like to share with us a short thought on kind of your definition or your experience with apathy, that'd be wonderful. Then we'll get back with Brother Keel. So you all know how to do this. Down at the bottom of your screen, there's this little smiley face with a plus birthmark on his forehead. If you click on that tab, up will come a raise your hand, and you can just raise your hand, and that will make it so much easier for Brother Gould to kind of see the different people that are there, even if you don't have your video on, which is perfectly fine, but I can see that you'd like to share in the conversation. So what I've asked is, what's your personal experience with apathy as far as a definition goes, or maybe you experienced it and could quickly share with us a story. Okay, I definitely didn't sell that one very good because apparently we're a bunch of mutes that have joined us today. So I know that some of you have opinions and thoughts. I'm perfectly fine to let the recording go until the very end and we shut it off and no one's participated because you don't feel you should. You know, the irony of this, Wayne, is we're talking about apathy.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Oh, there we go. All right, sister, go ahead.
As it's become more difficult for me to get around, to walk and stuff.
Sure.
I find myself going to sacrament meeting and then wanting to head out and come back home so I can just sit in one place and not have to move around. And recently I've missed Sunday school and Relief Society once each. And I think that's an example of my apathy, because I have thought, well, I studied the Sunday school lesson and I read the conference talk for Relief Society, and I don't really need to go listen to it in a class.
Yeah, who needs the spirit, right, sister?
Yeah.
Way oversold, that whole. All right, brother and sister, Sissel. Nope, it's Sissel. Go ahead, you two. You got your hand up, but you have to, there you go. Very good.
Unmute. This is before I joined the church, but as a young adult, I got seriously ill. I wound up spending 8 months in the Air Force Hospital with an illness. And in that time, I was not seeing any results to the positive. It just seemed like it was either staying the same or getting worse.
Sure.
And I contemplated even ending my life because what's the value of this?
Right.
But as I thought about that, the thoughts came into my head that this is the wrong thing to do. What would my wife and children think about Dad?
Wow.
Ending his life.
Yeah.
But to have that thought come to me, I didn't know the gospel in those days, so I didn't understand where this was coming from, but I knew it was wrong.
Wow. That's a powerful story, brother. Thanks for sharing that with us. And we're grateful that you listened to that. That's really special. Thanks for sharing that. And, I think that's a big part of this, Wayne, is that apathy, as you mentioned earlier, can have a big impact on our feeling of self-worth, our connection to the Savior, our willingness to continue on this path. I know a couple of weeks ago, many of us gave talks on the ability to overcome adversity. And it really hit me that I think a lot of apathy is groomed by Lucifer. If he can instill some of that apathy in you, where you don't need a God, you certainly don't need their teachings, then it becomes so much easier. As the sister said, I've already learned this stuff, right? And the pride cycle kicks in, then pretty soon, who needs a savior? And then if I don't need a savior, then I certainly don't need to, serve in the church and particularly set up chairs. Who needs to do or go to a music festival, which is a cheesy plug for the music festival on the 14th of November at 6:00 in the evening at the Stake Center. But I can see that, right? And we see so many members of the church really fall victim to this. But thanks for sharing that, brother. That was very powerful. So you hear some of these stories. Anybody else want to raise their hands and share with us their definition? Maybe they've got a different perspective of apathy. I know I did, and I shared it with the stake president a few days ago, and he seemed a little shocked, but he understood where I was coming from when I said, I don't think all apathy is bad. And I guess I'd like to ask Wayne and others. See, I think that apathy can be in two. See what I'm saying? Dog in the prostate. It's happening right now. McKenna, come get the dog, please.
I think Sister Hill had something to say.
Oh, good. So, for me, I think apathy has two elements. There can be things that I'm apathetic about, and that's perfectly fine. Like, here's the example I use. I don't care what the Kardashians do. I don't.
Yeah.
And I have total 100% apathy about what they do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good apathy, right? But then obviously, reading your scriptures, saying daily prayers, those kinds of things, I can't have apathy about that. Sister Hill, go.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the definitions that you gave or the reasons, Wayne, because I think it's important to realize that often, like especially with church, it might not mean that it's our testimony, but it could just mean maybe we've had the same calling for a long time, or we don't feel well, like the sister said, or whatever. Right. I mean, it's not our testimony. So it's important to kind of realize that it's maybe an outside reason that we can then work on separately. You have to kind of maybe find out why you're feeling apathetic and then attack that and not just assume, oh, my testimony's, sliding.
Great comment.
So I appreciate what you said.
Yeah, great comment.
And
thanks
something I really like about what you said, Sister Hill, is it usually isn't our testimony, but if we don't address it in a timely manner, it can become about our testimony. And so we do have to address it. But I think it's so true. It usually doesn't start out to be about our testimony at all.
Yeah. And how grateful are we that Brother Sissel found that out and realized that and almost did a self-check. And this is, like he said, before he even understood the gospel. Yeah. And he took action, and what a blessing it is for not only his family, but for all of us that he's there. So with that in mind, and what I'd like to do is kind of move on. And so with that in mind, Brother Keel, so we know apathy's out there with lots of different causes. Yeah. We see it growing in the church with people's attitudes, those kind of things. What are specific strategies that we can put in play to help us stave off apathy on the important things in our life?
Yeah, great question. So first, I think the first thing that I'd like to cover is something that President Nelson has been emphasizing over and over and over again recently, and it's about recognizing who we are, remembering who we are. And he said, no identifier should displace, replace, or take priority over these three enduring designations, which are that we're a child of God, a child of the covenant and a disciple of Jesus Christ. And trying to have that eternal perspective, I think, is so important to overcoming apathy. I think in a lot of times when we feel that apathy settling in, we lose sight of who we are, because we're focused more on the challenges that we're going through, and those challenges that we're going through become those things that we identify as, this is who I am. Because I'm going through this, this is who I am. And we need to have that eternal perspective of who we are. And I think also with that is I see too often people just stop there. Okay, I'm a child of God, child of the covenant, and disciple of Jesus Christ. And then I like to always push them, okay, but who else are you? Because we're all individuals. We all bring something to the table. So who else are we? We need to really define who we are, and then start working to become who that person is in our life. And there's a lot of different things that we can do to become that person. But first, identifying who we are, and not forgetting, why do we go to church? Well, because I'm a child of God, because I'm a child of the covenant, because I'm a follower of the Savior. Why do I, there have been times that when I've thought, why do I keep going and doing the callings that I have? Well, it's because of who I am. It's because I've been called to help other people discover who they are, and so I need to work to become that. It's using that idea, but along with that, we don't just need to figure out who we are, but who do we want to become? We say we want to become like the Savior. Well, specifically, who do we want to become? And the reason I think that's important is so that we have something to work toward. We have to have something that we're working towards, something to set the goals to become. I love the idea of the children and youth program. If it's done correctly, we need to first decide who we are and who we want to become, and have that really solidified. So then all of the different areas of our life, when we're setting those goals, can be directed and focused toward becoming that person that we want to become. I think that's an important piece to it, that if we don't have that, we're gonna be just wandering aimlessly, being tossed to and fro, just because we don't know who we are. But we need to figure out who we are, because if we don't figure out who we are, and we don't teach ourselves and others who we are, then the world is going to teach us who they want us to be. If you want to be cool, then you have to do this. If you want to be cool, you have to do this. If you want to have fun, you have to do this. And we have to say, well, because I'm a child of God, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I've always found it very helpful to remind myself of my eternal destiny and really my eternal beginnings through that song. I know it sounds silly, but I love that song. I tell people all the time in my academic life that, they ask me about my background, and I very much start with, well, first off, I'm a child of God. And that kind of sets a tone in the meeting. I think that's a great idea, Brother Keel. And then I love this idea of not only who I am right now, but as a child of God, how do I continue to progress, which is the whole reason I'm here. Would you suggest that we write some of those things down?
Yes, absolutely. And now that's like one of the assignments that I like to give people is write down who you are, who you want to become, and then the values that you use to become the person that you are. We use a lot of values. The things that are most important to us, we use those values to achieve a lot of our goals. And we need to use those same values to help us achieve the things that we want in life. And my example that I love to use in this is Captain Moroni. Captain Moroni, he defined the people of Nephi as followers of God, and to remind them when they were being attacked. When they're being attacked, it's really easy to be scared and to run away. And he said, no, this is who we are. And then he had the title of liberty that said, these are our values. The values that we have are these values that are going to help us win this battle. And those values were God, our religion and freedom, our peace, our wives, our children, and those 6 values. He's like, these are the things that we value, and this is how we're going to win the war. They defined who they are, they defined what they wanted to become, and then the values they were going to use to become that. And when they faltered, what did he do? He raised that banner and went and reminded everybody who they were, and then they won the war because they were fighting for those values. And that's what we really need to do in our lives. We need to almost make our own little title of liberty of, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and these are the values that are going to help us reach that goal.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I would strongly support the idea of writing it down. As a child, my father took it very seriously to write those values down. And even at my mother's home today, there's a very large brass plate on the front of their home. I think it was every time my father drove into the house after a long day at work, where he could be frustrated and maybe make some decisions inside the home because of his work life, that he read that as he pulled into the garage, and it reminded him of his truly eternal role as a father to 7 sons. So I appreciate that. And I think we can all do that. And, almost like the proclamation to the family when the first presidency and the council and quorum of the 12, they set out this title of liberty, as it were. So what a great suggestion. I see we've got one question. Then what I'd like to do for time's sake is open this up, Brother Keel, to having you answer questions from the audience about this whole idea of apathy. We've talked about what it is, the causes, how to overcome it, what are some strategies to help stave it off. But before we go that route, Brother Thompson, I know you've got a comment that you'd like to share with the group. Go ahead.
Well, Sister Hill has her hand up.
Sister Hill's had her hand up the whole time because she didn't take it down. See,
she just likes to have her hand up.
Yeah, she just pick me.
I think it's a practice. I think it's a practice that we all should do. Just raise our hand.
Yeah, she just raising. So go ahead, Dean.
I've been known to tell groups to make their challenge in this life determine what your foreordination is. Go to your patriarchal blessing, go to the blessings you've received, determine what your foreordination is, and then seek to fulfill it.
Yeah. That's an excellent suggestion, brother. I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree. That's great. Now, Chris, I see that you had your hand up. Where you just
he was just following my lead of having his hand up all the time. So
kind of what I figured, but
I appreciate
he got a little pale when I called his name, so I knew he was probably just waving. So that's great. Well, brothers and sisters, again, we are so grateful for your attendance here today. We try to leave about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for members of this audience to ask Wayne questions about the topic or other things, as the resident expert and someone who's really dedicated to helping people overcome some of their current challenges, and as Dean mentioned, achieve that eternal opportunity. We've given you some really great ideas, Wayne has, about how you can overcome some of the apathy that I think creeps into all of our lives on occasion. I don't think any of us are immune, as Lucifer wants to take out the elected, the people that are active in the gospel. So with that, I'm going to turn over. Let's go for about 5 minutes. Then I've got some very exciting news to share with this group. Cutting last minute news flash stuff. So Brother Corey, I see you've got your hand up. Go.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring it up, and Wayne, towards something that you had mentioned, as well as what we've been talking about here, right, is the fact that you need to figure out who you are, right? And looking, and I apologize to anybody that I might offend by this comment, but we've got a lot of mature folks on this call today. And I think that you all know who you are, right? You've had 50 plus years in most cases to figure out who you are. But Wayne, how does somebody, some of our younger generation, the younger generation that's coming up, that's going to be, the future leaders of the church and of our wards, how do they figure out, what's the best way for them to figure out who they are and where they're supposed to be going, or where they should be going in their life? And I know you mentioned write it down, right? But write down what? Like, I'm good at sewing. I'm good at fixing cars. Who am I? What defines me?
Well, you know, it's something I like to do with people is I make a list of all the things that you do. So if you like working on cars and you're a dad or a sister, brother, mom, grandma, grandfather, you know, write down all the things that you are, and then write down the strengths that it takes to do those things. As you do that, as you're like, hey, what kind of strengths does it take to become a mechanic? Well, you have to know how things work, so you have to have knowledge. So that's a strength. You have to be able to work with your hands. You have to be able to problem solve. You have to do a lot of different things to do that. And so you write down all the strengths that make up that person, and then as you look at it, those strengths make up that person that you are. You know, the part of who you are is what you stand for. What, you know, an example that I heard once was there was a lady that was really sick in the hospital, and the physical therapists were trying to get her to get up and do these exercises, but they were so painful and she couldn't do that. So they couldn't figure out how to convince her to get up and do the exercises. And then her family came and they were going to meet her downstairs. And so she's like, okay. And she got up and she went downstairs, and everybody was like, wow, you know, getting up and going downstairs, that's almost exactly what we needed her to do. And what was the thing that got her down there? Well, it was because she valued her family. Her family was important to her. So part of who she was a person that really loves family. And so she, you know, they used that as an incentive to get her to do those things that she needed to do. So figuring out who you are is trying to figure out what makes you do the things you want to do. So you could ask yourself, well, why do you know, the reason I keep bringing up mechanic is because you know, that was one of the examples you brought up, Corey, is, you know, why do you want to be a mechanic? You know, what is it that interests you in doing that? Well, why do you go to school? Well, because my parents want me to. Okay, but why do you work so hard? Why do you do all these things? Why do you play these sports? Why do you hang out with these friends? Why do you do all of these things? You know, figure out what is it that drives you, figure out those values, and those values can help define, okay, I know I'm a child of God, a child of the covenant, a follower of Jesus Christ, but on top of that, here's some of those values that also drive me to do what I need to do. And those are, that really defines who you are. And those are the things that can drive you to do everything that you need to do in your life. And the person that you are usually doesn't change a lot throughout life. You know, as we go through different stages in our life, different things matter to us, but usually that person that we are doesn't change. It might change a little bit here and there, but it usually doesn't change a lot. You know, no matter what decisions we've made, usually we're making those decisions because of the things that we really care about.
Excellent.
Thanks, Wayne.
Excellent question, Corey. Really great one, and an important one.
Yeah.
Like you said,
Absolutely.
I think life experiences really help define us, don't they? And so obviously the youth of the church can benefit. You know, Wayne, I would just add to the very wonderful comments that you've made and some of the insight you've provided is there's a lot of resources that the church has and wonderful talks about this idea of apathy, because this is not new. This isn't a pandemic problem. This isn't a consequence. It may be exacerbated by that, but it certainly isn't a consequence of the pandemic. Church talks, church addresses, issues like this have been dealt with in the gospel for millennium. So I would encourage us all to look for those talks. Obviously, one of the most recent ones with Elder Suarez has been already addressed in some wonderful topics there. The other thing I would suggest to all of us is that, you know, we need to really appreciate that our Heavenly Father has, and his Son have been through a lot of the feelings that come along with apathy, some of the depression, as Wayne, you mentioned. And really, if we find ourselves in a position of significant apathy about the things that matter, like I said, I have very significant apathy about the Kardashians. But if I have apathy about those things related to the gospel and the eternal outcome of my life and those that I'm sealed to, then I think it's important that we exercise the power of kneeling. You know, I think one of the greatest ways we can overcome that apathy is to get on our knees and to ask for that Spirit that can help us turn our perspectives around and maybe put us in a different place through the unconditional love of our brother. He didn't put any marks on it like, well, if you're suffering post-pandemic apathy, I don't want to deal with you, right? That's more than I understand. And you go someplace else. He said, I'll be there at all times. And again, I think that's important. So any last minute questions for Brother Keel? You know that he's around, you know the ward he's in. He's always available to each of you, and any of you that would like to reach out to him. Unless you have a Yahoo account, then it won't work. But you could certainly reach out to him, and he'd be more than willing to chat with you. Brothers, you guys that have shared some very personal stories, thank you so much for doing that today. That really resonated with how powerful this idea of apathy can be, up to and including some of the things that Alton talked about. I want to thank all of you for being here. In the last 2 minutes, I'm going to share with you some breaking news. Are you ready? October, there will not be a podcast. Apparently, there's a thing called General Conference. I don't get it, but you should probably watch that, the whole thing, okay? So that's the first thing, and that's why we're doing this week's podcast before the first of the month, because of General Conference. The next thing is our next podcast will be in November, and it will be about spiritual preparedness. And I know for the last couple of weeks, we've done things that are a little bit, you know, they're not emergency preparedness kind of things, but this last podcast of the year will be about preparing spiritually. And I have it hot off the press that we will change it up just a little bit, and we will have a panel discussion and kind of micro presentations. And we'd be blessed to have all three members of the stake presidency join us. They will be joining us in that and sharing their thoughts and insights on how members of the stake can prepare spiritually. So that's hot off to tickets. I think we'll probably get overwhelmed with viewers. We want to have you all there. It will be the first Sunday in November, and we look forward to seeing all of you. Again, Brother Keel, thank you very much for your insight and your dedication to your profession and the saints of this Carmichael stake and surrounding areas. Brothers and sisters, thanks for being here. We know it's sometimes a big challenge. We'd like to have you share this invitation with as many as you can. Love the conversations, love the interaction. That's really, really wonderful. We will be posting this on the church's site that we went to today, the YouTube channel for the Carmichael Stake News. That'll be up there. Brother Wozniak does a great job of making that all look great. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your Sabbath day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.